After creating our project and deploying it earlier with the localhost 4200, we can see that there are a lot of files that are default or generated using the ngnu command. I will explain this bit by bit, the important files that are really used in Angular or Angular is dependent of. The node module directory is a folder in a node.js project that contains all the dependencies required by the project. When you use the node package manager or yarn to install a package, it will be added to this directory. The contents of the node modules directory will vary depending on the specific packages that are installed in the project. Here are some common items you might find in the node modules directory. Packages. The directory will contain all the packages installed via npm, which will typically include a subdirectory for each packages. As you can see, there are a lot of packages in here, and inside this packages, there's also contents inside it, where it is generated by using the npm or the node package manager and is used by this Angular project. This is a .bin folder, or it's called binaries. If a package contains an executable files, such as a command line interface tool, this will be stored in a binary directory within the package. It has dependencies. Some packages may have dependencies on other packages. If a package has dependencies, npm will install them in the node modules directory as well. So this is where your bootstraps, the icons that you wanted to use will be located. After inputting the command line command for the bootstrap, for the fav icons, and etc. Package metadata. Each package installed in the node_modules directory will contain metadata about the packages, such as its version, description, and dependencies. This metadata is stored in a file called package.json. Um, package.json is located in here. This is where all the dependencies and the metadata about the package is located. Symlinks. In some cases, packages may have dependencies that have already been installed in the node_modules directory of another package. In this case, npm or yarn will create a symlink in the current packages node_modules directory that points to a dependency in the other packages node_modules directory. Now we're inside the source folder or SRC. The SRC directory is a key directory in an Angular project, as it contains the source code for the application. The exact contents of the SRC directory will vary depending on the specific project, but here are some common items you might find. Index.html. This is the main HTML file for the application, which is loaded in the browser and serves as the entry point for the application. Index.ts or index.js, where in our case here in our project it is called main.ts. This is the main TypeScript or JavaScript file for the application. But in Angular, we basically use TypeScript, so it is gonna be a main.ts, which is loaded by the browser after the HTML file. It typically sets up the application and loads the required components and modules. App. This is the main directory for the application code and typically contains the root component and other components. Here, in our Visual Studio Code, we can see that we have a app-routing.modules.ts wherein it contains this syntaxes or these codes. This is basically a routing module here in Angular, but we will tackle about that in the future videos. App.component.css, by the name itself, it is .css. Basically, you input all of your CSS codes in here. Then app component.html, it's basically .html, so you know that it is a HTML file wherein in the default Angular project, the HTML and the CSS file are located in the app.component.html, but we will do it later in the Angular way. This is just the default code, so you don't need to worry about this right now. App.component.ts, this is basically where you input all the TypeScript codes inside a Angular component. Then we can find assets. Assets is the directory that contains any static assets used by the application, such as images, fonts, or other files that are loaded by the browser. Styles. Styles.css. This directory contains any style sheets used by the applications, such as CSS or SASS files. As you may notice that there's like two .css files. Basically, in styles.css, this is where you input all of your global CSS code, wherein in the app.component CSS, this is where you input your local CSS codes. But in our later course, we will create our custom components without using this app components folder. And polyfill or polyfill.ts, this file includes polyfills that are required to support older browsers or to add missing features to a newer browser. Overall, the src directory is where most of the application code assets are stored, and it serves as a starting point for the application process. After discussing this src folder, I will now discuss about the angular.json because this is also important. If you're gonna use Bootstrap, you need this angular.json. You can input the code here in the script so that it will automatically use Bootstrap and some other dependencies. Angular.json is a configuration file for an Angular project that specifies how the project should be built and deployed. It is used by the Angular CLI or command line interface to generate build files, run tests, and perform other development tasks. The angular.json files contains various configuration settings for the project, including projects. This section defines the individual projects in the workspace and specify the root directory, source files, and output directories for each project. Build options. This section contains various options that controls how the project is built, including the production plug, which triggers production mode builds. Serve options. This section contains options that control how the project is served during development, including the port number, SSL configuration, and other server-related settings. Test options. This section contains options that control how the project's tests are run, including the testing framework, test coverage settings, and other testing related settings. Linting options. This section contains options that control how the project's code is linted, including the linting tool, rules, and other linting related settings. Assets. This section specifies any assets that should be copied to the output directory during the build process, such as images, fonts, or other static files, styles, and scripts. This section specifies any style sheets or scripts that should be included in the build process. Overall, Angular.json file is a crucial part of an Angular project as it specifies how the project should be built and deployed. Developers can customize the configuration settings to match their specific needs, and the Angular CLI uses these settings to automate many of the development tasks. Now, inside the package.json. In an Angular project, the package.json file is used to manage the project's dependencies, as well as to specify various build and development settings. Here are some of the common items you might find in an Angular package.json file. Name and version. The name and version fields specify the name and version number of the project, dependencies, and dev dependencies. The dependencies field lists the packages that the project depends on to run, while the dev dependencies field lists the packages that are only required for the development purposes. Here is the dev dependencies, and here is the dependencies. Scripts. The scripts field contains commands that can be run from the command line using npm or yarn, such as start to start the application or build to build the application or the project. The scripts can also be customized to run custom development or deployment tasks. Angular CLI configurations. The Angular-CLI field contains configuration settings for the Angular CLI, which is used to generate components, modules, and services and other code for the project. Basically, the Angular CLI configuration helps us in using the ng commands like ng-new for creating new project, ng-serve for deploying our application in the web, or for running a development server for the application. That's the purpose of the Angular CLI configurations. Build configurations. The build field specify various settings for the project's build process, such as the output directory, the index file location, and whether or not to use AOT or ahead of time compilation. Linting configuration. The lint field specifies various settings for the project's linting processes, such as the linting tool to use and the rules to apply. Testing configuration. The test field specifies various settings for the project's testing process, such as the testing framework to use, the test file location, and the code coverage settings. Overall, the package.json file in an Angular project serves as a central hub for managing dependencies, scripts, and other configuration settings, and it is an important part of the development or deployment process. Now going back to the app module.ts. App module.ts is a TypeScript file used to define the root module of an Angular application. It is where developers declare and configure various components, services, and other functionality that make up the application. The ng module decorator is used to define the module and specify its properties. Here are some of the most common properties you might find in app module.ts. Imports. These are all imports. The imports array contains a list of other modules that the root module depends on. These can include Angular core modules, third-party libraries, and custom modules defined within the application. As you may notice, browser module and app routing module is here in the imports. Every time that we add a new import here, we also add it to the imports here. It must always be inside the imports array so that it will work within the scope of the app module .ts. Declarations. The declarations array contains a list of components, directives, and pipes that are part of the module. These are the building blocks of the application's user interface. As you may notice, in the declarations app component, inside the declarations array, it is app component, and as you can see in here, it's all app.component. Basically, later, if we create a component, inside these declarations should be the same as the names of these files inside the component. Providers. The providers array contains a list of services that are part of the module. These are used to provide data and functionality to the components and other parts of the applications. Bootstrapped. The bootstrap property specifies the component that should be used as the root of the application. This is typically the app component. Exports. The exports arrays contains a list of components, directives, and pipes that can be used by other modules that import this module. Like if it's inside the export class and then you call this app module inside a different module or a component, the export inside this app module is accessible through that new module that you're going to use, which you imported this app.module.ts. Entry components. The entry components arrays contains a list of components that should be compiled as a standalone components even if they are not used within any other components. Overall, the app.module.ts file is an essential part of an Angular application as it defines the main module of the application and sets up its various components and services. By configuring this file correctly, developers can create a robust, maintainable, and scalable application that can be easily extended and updated over time. Thank you for listening in this module. I will see you in the next module. Thank you.